The brisk wind coursed through Greenwood Cemetery in Brooklyn, stirring the golden-brown leaves that had started to accumulate around the newly excavated grave. The sky hung heavy with a muted gray, perfectly mirroring the sorrow that enveloped the mourners. In their midst was David Reynolds, a figure renowned for his vast fortune, thriving business empire, and the influence that accompanied his status. However, none of that held significance today. Today, he was merely a man grappling with the absence of his beloved wife. Evelyn had been his steadfast support. She was the sole witness to the figure concealed by wealth, the one who understood the cold calculations, the person hidden beneath the polished exterior. They had crafted a shared existence, rich with affection, joy, and a tinge of remorse. The shadow of unfulfilled parenthood lingered in their thoughts, yet they had found a way to coexist with that ache. As he stood by her grave, observing the coffin descend into the earth, a profound emptiness enveloped his heart. It felt like a piece of him had been interred alongside her. The funeral unfolded with the grandeur that was anticipated. The city's upper crust had assembled, some moved by authentic grief, while others were there merely for the season's social spectacle. Colleagues, business partners, and friends stepped forward to express their condolences, each handshake and hug feeling somewhat mechanical. David hardly took any of it in. His world had turned quiet, overshadowed by the lingering echoes of Evelyn's laughter, the warmth of her voice forever out of reach. He longed for the crowd to vanish, to grant him solitude in his sorrow, yet he understood that such a wish was unattainable. A man of his caliber was never genuinely solitary, save for the aspects that truly counted. As the service concluded and individuals began to disperse, David stood motionless, gazing at the gleaming wood of the coffin now blanketed in earth. His fingers quivered subtly as he wrapped his coat more snugly around himself, the chill gnawing at the fabric. The driver, an elderly gentleman named Joe, stood at a respectful distance, fully aware that his employer required this time alone. David inhaled deeply and began to walk away, but then something unusual caught his eye. A young woman lingered at the cemetery's edge, partially concealed by a towering oak tree. Her complexion was ashen, and her demeanor was inscrutable. Her attire set her apart from the rest. Amidst the crowd adorned in lavish black coats and chic scarves, she stood out in a modest jacket, a bit frayed at the edges, paired with jeans that had certainly lived a full life. Her long brown hair cascaded gently over her shoulders, and there was an unmistakable familiarity in her stance, with her hands tightly balled into fists, as if she were grappling with a storm within. David furrowed his brow, attempting to recall her identity. He failed to identify her from any professional networks, nor did she appear to fit into his realm. Yet there was an essence to her, a quality that quickened his heartbeat, leaving him puzzled by the reason behind it. She advanced with a cautious step, pausing as though weighing her choice anew. Their gazes locked for an instant, and David experienced an inexplicable attraction to her. Yet, just as he was about to speak, she pivoted sharply and strode off. "Excuse me, sir." Joe's voice interrupted his musings. "The vehicle is prepared." David watched the young woman disappear into the distance, then sighed and shook his head. It was likely inconsequential. Perhaps she was a far-off kin of Evelyn's, a visitor there to honor her memory yet hesitant to step forward. He brushed off the peculiar meeting and strolled toward the vehicle, his thoughts already plunging back into the depths of sorrow. That evening, as he lingered in his penthouse with a view of the New York skyline, the memory of the girl lingered in his mind. He had never been one to linger on unfamiliar faces, yet he couldn't dismiss the sense that her presence at the cemetery held some deeper meaning. He filled a glass with whiskey, the amber liquid dancing in the soft glow of his study's light. His gaze drifted to a framed photograph of Evelyn resting on his desk. "I miss you," he murmured, his voice trembling just a bit. Evelyn had always possessed a unique ability to find significance in the world around her, holding steadfast to the belief that every event unfolded with purpose. If she were present, she would have advised him to trust his instincts regarding the girl. He exhaled softly and savored a sip of his drink, reassuring himself that it was merely sorrow weaving illusions in his thoughts. Yet, beneath the surface, he was aware that this encounter would not be their final farewell. Yet, for some inexplicable reason, the image of the young woman lingered in his thoughts, refusing to fade away. That night, slumber eluded me. He lay awake in his penthouse in Manhattan, gazing at the ceiling, attuned to the distant hum of the city. Each time he shut his eyes, she reappeared, positioned by the oak tree, her face ashen, hands tightly balled, her expression a tumult of fear and desperation. There was an inexplicable quality about her that stirred a sense of unease within him. By morning, he assured himself that he was merely overanalyzing. It was sorrow weaving illusions in his thoughts. The funeral had drained him emotionally, and perhaps he had merely conjured the depth of the experience. He urged himself to let it go. Yet, letting go proved to be quite a challenge. The following afternoon, David sat in his office on the 54th floor of the Reynolds Corporation building, gazing vacantly at a pile of reports. Mark, his assistant, had lined up a series of meetings one after another, yet he hardly focused on any of them. His thoughts wandered, captivated by the enigma of the girl. He had dedicated his whole existence to making thoughtful choices, tackling challenges, and forecasting market movements with accuracy, yet he couldn't rid himself of the sense that this was something significant. Annoyed with his own indecision, he grabbed his phone and began to sift through his contacts, determined to locate the name he sought. "Joe, I require your assistance with something," David stated immediately upon his driver's response. "Do you recall the young woman we saw at the cemetery yesterday? The individual who lingered near the oak tree?" A moment of silence lingered before Joe replied, "Yeah, I saw her." It seemed as though she had something to express, yet she hesitated and decided against it. "Precisely," David murmured. "I must uncover her identity." "Do you believe she was acquainted with Mrs. Reynolds?" Joe inquired. "I don't know," David said, running a hand through his hair. "Yet, I sense she was more than merely an unfamiliar face. Consult with the personnel at the cemetery. Perhaps they witnessed something. Discover all that you can." Joe consented, leaving David with a swirl of excitement and apprehension as he hung up the phone. He couldn't quite grasp the reason behind his unwavering resolve to seek out this girl. Perhaps it was due to Evelyn's unwavering belief in destiny, and a part of him questioned whether this was a meaningful indication. As the evening wore on, David lounged in his penthouse, a drink in hand, when Joe's call came through. "I have located her, sir." David straightened his posture. "Who is this person?" Joe mentioned that her name is Lena Brooks. At 24 years old, she resides in Queens, and here's where it takes a fascinating turn. Her mother was a woman named Sarah Brooks. David's hold on the glass became more intense at the sound of that name. Sarah Brooks. A name that had slipped from his ears for more than 20 years, yet remained etched in his memory. His heart raced within his chest as long-buried memories came flooding back. Sarah was his first love, during a time when he was a young man striving to carve out his identity. In Chicago, their paths crossed as he pursued his aspirations as a driven investment analyst, eager to ascend the corporate hierarchy. Sarah was unlike anyone he had encountered before, untamed and full of life, her laughter capable of illuminating any space. They had plunged into love with fervor, yet it proved fleeting. When David received a transformative opportunity in New York, he opted for his profession instead of romance. Sarah pleaded with him to remain, expressing that they could create a life together anywhere, yet he was too engulfed in his aspirations. The most recent moment he shared with her was filled with tears, as she expressed that he would come to regret his decision to leave her behind. He had overlooked her. Now, more than 25 years later, her name had unexpectedly re-entered his life. Her daughter was just the same. David took a deep breath. "Have you discovered any additional information?" Joe paused, uncertainty flickering in his mind. "Absolutely, sir. Sarah departed from this world last year. Oncology." A peculiar constriction settled in David's chest. Sarah had vanished. Exactly as Evelyn did. And now her child, his child. No. That couldn't be done. If Lena was 24, it indicated that Sarah had been expecting when he departed. Yet, she kept it to herself. The heaviness of the understanding almost stole his breath away. Had he inadvertently forsaken his own offspring? Joe's voice interrupted his contemplation. "What would you like to do, sir?" David hesitated before responding. Thoughts surged through his mind as he struggled to connect the dots. If Lena was indeed his daughter, it implied that she had spent her formative years without his presence. Did she endure pain? Did Sarah find it challenging to raise her on her own? A heavy sense of remorse twisted in his gut at the image of Sarah battling cancer all alone. He had enjoyed a life of opulence while his own daughter, if she truly was his, may have faced hardships. "I must speak with her," David finally declared, his tone resolute. "Discover her workplace and the nature of her job. I must see her." Joe consented and ended the call, leaving David to ponder in solitude. He rose from his seat and approached the window, gazing out at the city where he had forged his empire. After years of achievement, the success and wealth suddenly seemed devoid of purpose. He had devoted his whole existence to pursuing a goal, only to come to the profound realization that he had neglected something far more significant. Yet, the lingering question was, did Lena truly know? Did Sarah mention anything about him to her? Or had she been raised under the impression that she had no father whatsoever? After several hours had passed and the city fell into a hushed stillness, with only the rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock echoing in the penthouse, David retrieved an old box from the depths of his closet. Within lay letters, photographs, and memories he had carefully tucked away. He stumbled upon a photograph from years past, capturing a moment with Sarah, her radiant smile and his arms enveloping her. His throat constricted as the weight of time's passage dawned on him. He was uncertain about Lena's desires, or whether she desired anything from him at all. Yet, one thing was undeniable, his life had transformed in an irreversible way. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. David sat in his office the next morning, yet for the first time in his life, the affairs of business held no significance for him. The reports scattered across his desk, the emails accumulating like forgotten memories, the phone calls lingering in silence, all seemed remote, trivial. His thoughts drifted, ensnared in the echoes of a history he had tried to forget. Sarah Brooks. Her name resonated in his mind like a melody he had cherished but let slip away. Now presenting Lena Brooks. A name that had always been a mystery, yet now occupied his thoughts incessantly. The burden of understanding pressed down on him. If she truly was his daughter, it signified that he had overlooked her whole existence. 24 years filled with celebrations, initial strides, theatrical performances, and challenges. All things. And it was all due to the fact that Sarah had never revealed it to him. Or perhaps she hadn't. Had she made an effort to connect with him, only for him to be too consumed by his aspirations to see? The notion struck him with a piercing wave of remorse. Joe had demonstrated his usual efficiency. By noon, David found himself with a comprehensive report laid out before him. Details about Lena's residence, her workplace, and some aspects of her life. She worked as a waitress at a quaint diner in Queens, struggling to make ends meet. She resided in a humble apartment, a stark contrast to the luxurious penthouses and grand mansions that David had devoted his life to amassing. She was all alone, with no close relatives remaining. Only child. Absent guardians. Only her. The revelation hit him with an intensity he hadn't anticipated. She had been raised without a father, and now she faced the heartache of losing her mother as well. Did she linger by Sarah's grave as he had by Evelyn's, experiencing that same overwhelming sense of solitude? He had devoted his whole life to making unyielding choices without a moment's hesitation, yet this situation felt distinct. This held a deep significance. For the first time, he found himself uncertain about the correct course of action. Did he step into that diner and reveal the truth to her? Was she truly interested in finding out? Her gaze at him during the funeral suggested an internal struggle, as if she were weighing the decision to come closer. Had she already begun to suspect? Or was her presence merely a gesture of respect for Evelyn? Countless inquiries, yet no solutions in sight. As the afternoon waned, David found himself in Queens, nestled in the back of his black town car, observing from afar as Lena busied herself inside the diner. He had promised himself he wouldn't step inside. He simply yearned to catch a glimpse of her. Yet, in this moment, he found himself unable to look away from her. She wiped down the table with swift, practiced motions, a weary yet courteous smile gracing her lips as she engaged with a customer. Her lengthy brown locks were gathered in a relaxed ponytail, with a few wisps cascading over her face. In that fleeting instant, her laughter rang out. From his seat, the sound was almost imperceptible, yet it carried an unsettling quality that sent a chill racing down his spine. It was known. Not in the manner of Evelyn's voice, but in a different, more profound sense. It was the sound of Sarah's laughter. His chest constricted. This had transcended mere speculation. He was aware. He sensed it deeply. He swung the car door open and stepped out without a second thought. From the driver's seat, Joe shot him a look filled with curiosity, yet David chose to disregard it. He navigated the street, his heart racing with an intensity he hadn't felt in years. The bell above the diner's door chimed softly as he entered. The aroma of coffee and fried delights permeated the atmosphere, intertwining with the hum of chatter and the clinking of plates. A handful of gazes shifted in his direction. He certainly stood out. His costly suit and gleaming shoes gave him the appearance of someone entirely mismatched in a humble diner such as this. Yet, he remained indifferent. His gaze was fixed on Lena. She was still unaware of his presence. She poured coffee for the elderly man at the counter, listening attentively to his words with a gentle nod. David inhaled deeply and approached her with purpose. Suddenly, as if attuned to an unseen force, she pivoted. As their gazes locked, the world around them faded away, suspended in a perfect moment. Lena held the coffee pot tightly, her hand quivering ever so slightly. Her eyes unmistakably reflected recognition. She was fully aware of his identity. "Mr. Reynolds," she stated, her tone calm yet cautious. David felt a parched sensation in his throat. She was aware of his name. That indicated she had researched him. "I was hoping we could talk," he said, his voice softer than usual. She placed the coffee pot on the counter, her hands brushing against her apron as she wiped them clean. "Concerning what topic?" He surveyed his surroundings. The diner had a moderate crowd, just enough to make this conversation feel out of place. A secluded spot. After a brief moment of observation, she exhaled softly. "I will be finished in an hour. If you happen to be around at that time, we can have a conversation." David gave a slight nod before pivoting and making his way to an unoccupied booth by the window. The gaze of the other patrons weighed heavily upon him, intrigued by the figure in the tailored suit who had just entered, inquiring about their waitress. Yet, it all felt insignificant. The only thing that truly counted was her unwillingness to decline. A single hour stretched on endlessly. He lingered over the menu, feigning interest while nursing a cup of coffee that he hardly savored. He observed her glide through the diner, maintaining an air of normalcy, yet he sensed an underlying tension in her demeanor. At last, as her shift came to a close, she removed her apron and approached him, her face a mask of mystery. "A park lies just a few blocks away," she remarked. "Let's stroll and chat." David rose to his feet and trailed behind her, his heart pounding with anticipation. The crisp evening air enveloped them as they strolled quietly for a few moments. At last, she came to a halt by a bench and pivoted to confront him. "I know who you are," she said, crossing her arms. "I've been aware for some time now." David gulped nervously. "Did your mom ever share with you?" Lena gave a slight shake of her head. "Not in a straightforward manner. However, I discovered the truth. As she fell ill, I began to sift through old documents and medical records, and there it was, your name on my birth certificate. His chest constricted. She kept it to herself. I assumed, she remarked with a touch of bitterness, since you never showed up. You never sought us out. You have just departed. David experienced a gut-wrenching sensation. Had I been aware? However, you did not, she interrupted. And that's the crux of the matter. My mother brought me up by herself. She juggled 2 jobs to ensure there was always food on the table for me. And where have you been? Are you in your high-rise, raking in the cash? The fury in her tone was warranted, and David found himself without a rebuttal. He was at a loss for words on how to fix this situation. He finally spoke, expressing his desire to understand you better. If you would permit me. Lena fixed her gaze on him for what felt like an eternity before finally breaking the silence. I'm uncertain about my desire to get to know you. After a moment of reflection, she continued, but I will consider it. It was rather minimal. Yet, it held significance. Before moving on, please subscribe to our channel, like, and share. David dedicated his life to closing deals, negotiating contracts, and making strategic decisions that guaranteed his success. Yet, as he sat in his penthouse that night, gazing at the shimmering lights of New York, he sensed he was a man who had relinquished control over it all. Lena's voice resonated in his thoughts. I'm uncertain about the desire to get to know you. She was completely justified in feeling that way. He had been absent throughout her life, not out of a desire to leave her behind, but simply because he had never been aware of her existence. Yet, did that alter the truth of her experiences? She had been raised in the absence of a father, witnessing her mother's hardships, while he resided in comfort, unaware of the life he had abandoned. Regardless of his attempts to rationalize the situation, the guilt lingered, an oppressive burden upon him. After many years, he suddenly began to doubt the core principles that had shaped his existence. He devoted years to pursuing success, convinced that riches and influence were the pinnacle of achievement. And yet, as he stood at Sarah's grave and saw Lena for the first time, he understood the profound emptiness of it all. What significance did all his wealth hold if he had faltered in the most crucial role of his existence, that of a father? For years, he believed that Evelyn was the sole woman he had ever genuinely loved, yet now, memories of Sarah began to resurface, unbidden. She was unlike anyone he had encountered before. She possessed kindness, intelligence, and an unwavering sense of independence. They had devoted countless evenings to discussing aspirations, existence, and what lay ahead. Discussions he had not engaged in with anyone since. And now she had vanished, leaving a daughter who sought to distance herself from him. The following morning, David came to a conclusion. He had no intention of imposing himself on Lena's world, yet he also had no plans to fade away. He yearned to assist her, regardless of whether she ever acknowledged him as her father. He lifted the receiver and dialed Joe's number. He expressed a desire for a trust fund to be established for Lena Brooks. She doesn't need to be aware that it's for me, but I desire for her to have financial stability. Joe paused on the other end. Do you really think she won't discover it? David let out a slow breath. Ensure it remains unidentifiable. Ensure that she is well looked after. Several days went by without a word from Lena. David felt the urge to connect, yet he honored her need for distance. Then, one evening, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number appeared. His heart raced as he responded. Greetings. A moment of silence followed, then a voice I recognized broke through. Lena here. David adjusted his posture, sitting up with renewed intent. Lena. I'm pleased you reached out. She exhaled softly. I've been pondering. I find myself uncertain about my feelings regarding all of this, yet I do have questions that linger in my mind. David acknowledged her, though she remained unaware of his gesture. Feel free to inquire about anything you wish. She paused, contemplating her words before finally speaking. Did you have affection for my mother? The inquiry took him by surprise. He had invested so much time in suppressing those feelings, yet now, in the presence of Lena, he found himself unable to ignore the reality. Indeed, he finally spoke up. I certainly did. Lena paused, lost in thought. So, what kept you from being present? David swept his fingers through his hair. I was unfamiliar with Lena. If I had. He paused, aware that expressing I would have been there held no significance for her at this moment. Text, I suppose I simply can't grasp why my mom never mentioned it to you, she said. David confessed that he felt the same way. Perhaps she assumed I wouldn't be affected. Perhaps she believed I was overly immersed in my profession. Or perhaps, he paused in uncertainty. Perhaps she felt a sense of fear. What is there to fear? That I would take you away from her, David murmured gently. She was aware of my resources and the connections I possessed. Perhaps she feared that if I discovered the truth, I would attempt to seek custody. Lena let out a weary breath. Perhaps. David made the bold choice to embrace uncertainty. Are you interested in getting together? Shall we have a conversation face to face? A lengthy silence ensued. At last, she replied, yes, I believe I would. The following afternoon, they convened at a serene cafe in Brooklyn. Upon David's arrival, Lena was already present, seated by the window, gently stirring her cup of coffee. She glanced up as he drew near, her face a mask of ambiguity. He took a seat opposite her, an unexpected wave of anxiety washing over him, more intense than any he had experienced in a boardroom meeting. You actually decided to come, she remarked, raising an eyebrow. I said I would, he replied. She observed him intently for a brief moment. So, share a bit about yourself. Not the wealthy persona, but the authentic you. David found himself questioning whether he truly recognized that person any longer. He started by saying, I was raised in Chicago. A family of the middle class. My father worked in a factory, while my mother dedicated her life to teaching. I navigated my college journey while simultaneously establishing my business from scratch. He paused briefly before continuing, I met your mother during a business trip to Seattle. She was employed at a bookstore. I entered in search of a book and emerged utterly enchanted by her presence. A subtle smile played at the edges of Lena's mouth. That seems to fit her perfectly. David acknowledged with a nod. She possessed a unique ability to transform every moment into an exhilarating journey. That must be the reason I was drawn to her so fast. Lena swirled her coffee with a distracted air. It's strange, she remarked. Listening to stories about my mom from someone who experienced her life in a way that was entirely different from my own. David gulped, feeling the tightness in his throat. I am curious about her journey following our time together. How did she embody the role of a mother? Lena's gaze became gentle. She was extraordinary. Powerful. She poured her heart and soul into everything for me. She juggled 2 jobs, ensuring I had everything I required, even at the cost of her own needs. David's remorse intensified. She ought not to have faced it by herself. No, she shouldn't have, Lena said, her voice cutting through the air. Yet she did. David studied her intently. How about you, Lena? What are your aspirations in life? She released a soft chuckle. That question carries a lot of weight. She gazed out the window. I aspire to pursue something beyond merely serving tables. I had aspirations of attending college, but things didn't pan out as I had hoped. David paused, contemplating his words before finally breaking the silence. What if you were still able to? Her brow furrowed in discontent. Could you clarify what you mean? Imagine a world where financial concerns didn't exist. Lena tensed up. Are you attempting to purchase my pardon? Absolutely not, David replied with conviction. My only desire is to offer assistance. If pursuing college is still your goal, I can help you achieve that, though there's no obligation to accept my offer. She gazed at him, her eyes lingering for an extended moment. "I'm uncertain." "There's no rush to make a decision," he said softly. "Consider it for a moment." She inclined her head with deliberation. "I shall." For the first time, David experienced a glimmer of hope. He still had a considerable journey ahead to gain her trust, but at least now there was a glimmer of hope. Yet, as he sat opposite Lena in that serene Brooklyn cafe, he understood that this was a unique form of negotiation. A realm where figures and tactics bore no significance. This wasn't about triumph or defeat. It concerned something much more delicate. Restoring a bond with a daughter who had ample justification to maintain her distance. As the afternoon lingered, their dialogue deepened, delving into memories, into remorse, and into the harsh realities that neither could evade. Lena chose her words with caution, her demeanor protective, as if she were weighing the decision to either invite David closer or maintain the barrier that separated them. She savored her coffee in deliberate, contemplative sips, her gaze probing his features for a hint of understanding. Maybe it's honesty, or maybe it's remorse. For the first time in years, David found himself utterly speechless. "I'm not sure what you're expecting from me," Lena finally said, placing her cup on the table. "I'm not quite sure what I'm hoping for from this." David inclined his body just a touch, placing his forearms on the table's surface. "I hold no expectations. I simply wish to understand you better." She released a soft chuckle, gently shaking her head. "That's the crux of the matter. You're not familiar with me. You haven't done that at all." Her eyes darted to the window. "For 24 years, your existence was a complete mystery to me." Her words landed with the force of a gut punch. It wasn't merely that he had been absent in her upbringing, it was that she had come to believe she had no father whatsoever. There were no tales shared at night, no celebrations of birthdays side by side, no cherished father-daughter rituals. Only quietude. David breathed out slowly, selecting his words with precision. "Past is unchangeable, Lena, yet I can offer my presence in this moment." She observed him intently, as if weighing the possibility of placing her trust in him. "What significance does being here hold for you? Are you just tossing cash my way? Establishing an elaborate trust fund to ease your guilt?" He shook his head in disbelief. "This isn't the focus here." He took a moment before continuing, "But if there's any way I can assist you, I will." Lena let out a weary sigh, her fingers gently massaging her temples. "Your money doesn't interest me, David." David experienced a surge of irritation, directed not towards her but rather at the circumstances surrounding them. He had dedicated his life to resolving issues through financial means and taking action, yet this was a challenge that couldn't be addressed with a simple exchange. "I see," he replied thoughtfully. "But what if it transcends mere financial gain? What if it revolves around providing you with choices? A future that truly excites you?" She regarded him with a hint of doubt. "What if I'm unsure about my desires?" "We'll just work it out," he stated plainly. Lena let out a quick breath, her fingers drumming rhythmically on the table's surface. "Honestly, I'm not claiming that I'm prepared to jump into a significant father-daughter relationship with you just yet. It's premature for that." "I see," David replied, attempting to mask his disappointment. Yet, she paused, selecting her words with precision. "Perhaps we could proceed at a more leisurely pace. Let's explore the possibilities ahead." It wasn't an enthusiastic affirmation. The reunion fell short of the expectations he had quietly nurtured within himself. Yet, it held significance. A new chapter unfolds. A week went by since their encounter, and David held back the impulse to inundate her with calls or texts. He hoped she would connect when she felt ready. One evening, as the night deepened, his phone suddenly illuminated with a message. "Lena, will you be available tomorrow? I have something to share with you." David's fingers lingered above the keyboard, poised for his reply. David, naturally. At what time and in which location? The following afternoon, David discovered himself in an unfamiliar neighborhood. Bushwick, Brooklyn. It stood in stark contrast to the sleek glass towers and opulent condos he was accustomed to. The streets were adorned with aged brick structures, vibrant murals embellishing the walls, a fusion of history and resilience that narrated a tale of its own. As he caught sight of Lena standing outside a quaint little shop, that all-too-familiar flutter of anxiety washed over him once more. "You arrived," she remarked while securing her hands in the pockets of her coat. "Certainly," he replied. "What is this location?" She gestured towards the glass door. "Step inside." As David stepped inside, he was instantly enveloped by the aroma of fresh paint mingling with a subtle metallic tang. The area was compact yet brimming with vitality. Canvases adorned the walls, some still in the midst of creation, while others radiated with vibrant hues and deep feelings. In the rear, several creators immersed themselves in their craft, absorbed in their individual realms. "This is where I dedicate the majority of my hours," Lena remarked. "This is a gathering place for artists in the area. We collaborate in this space, showcase our creations, and support one another's development." David surveyed his surroundings with a sense of genuine admiration. "This is truly remarkable." Lena offered a faint smile. "I have been visiting this place since I was 16 years old. It's the sole place where I've truly felt a sense of belonging." David glanced in her direction. "Do you create art?" She merely shrugged her shoulders. "I'm not sure I would label myself that way. I simply bring forth." She guided him to the rear, where a canvas rested upon an easel. David's breath hitched at the sight. It was a portrait of Sarah. The details were strikingly precise, from the way her hair framed her face to the warmth that radiated from her eyes. Lena seemed to have immortalized a fragment of her mother's essence within the strokes of her brush. Lena spoke softly, "I painted this after she passed away. It was my method of keeping her close." David forced down the tightness in his throat. "It is truly stunning." Lena paused, contemplating her next words. "I can't quite explain why I brought you here," she confessed. "Perhaps I simply wished for you to glimpse a side of me that transcends mere anger." David glanced at her, his gaze gentle. "I appreciate that you did." For the first time since their paths crossed, Lena regarded him not as a stranger. In her eyes lingered a hint of uncertainty, yet beneath it all, there was an essence, delicate, yet undeniably present. "I'm uncertain about what lies ahead," she confessed. David replied, "Neither do I. However, I would love for us to explore this together." Lena nodded thoughtfully, weighing her options. For the first time, the distance between them seemed less daunting to overcome. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel and share it with your friends. Your support means a lot. David had dedicated his existence to mastering every detail of his surroundings. Everything about him, his enterprise, his monetary matters, and the individuals in his circle. As he sat in the cozy Brooklyn art studio, observing his daughter immersed in her painting, he came to understand that this was a process beyond his control, one that couldn't be hurried. Lena moved fluidly, her brush dancing over the canvas, immersed in a realm he could not enter. The silence that enveloped them had transformed. It was no longer awkward or strained, but rather, it felt almost at ease. A week prior, he had been an unfamiliar figure to her. Now, he had become a notable presence in her life. A delicate existence, perhaps, yet one that remained unyielding to dismissal. As he sat there observing her blend hues on her palette, he pondered what Sarah might express if she could witness them at this moment. Would she feel joy that he had at last discovered their daughter? Or would she be enraged by his prolonged absence? He yearned for her forgiveness, hoping she would grasp that he had been unaware. Yet, beneath the surface, uncertainty lingered within him. Lena finally shattered the stillness, placing her brush aside and extending her arms in a graceful stretch. "What is it that you actually do?" she inquired, arching an eyebrow. "I'm aware of your wealth, but what does that truly signify?" David found himself amused by her straightforwardness. "I operate a firm focused on real estate investments." We acquire properties, enhance them, and sell them for a gain. Lena gave a slow, deliberate nod. So, you're the type who transforms classic neighborhoods into high-priced condominiums. David let out a heavy breath. Not every time. At times, indeed. However, it encompasses much more. We dedicate our efforts to revitalizing historic structures, infusing fresh commerce into areas in need of support. It's more than just financial gain. Lena observed him intently, as though she were weighing the truth of his words. So you acquire items, enhance them, and then resell for a profit? In a manner, indeed, David replied. She wore a sly grin. Good luck attempting to turn me around. David chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. That's not my intention, Lena. Her expression eased a bit as she reclined against the table. I'm not quite sure what this is meant to be. Are you attempting to compensate for time that has slipped away? Or do you simply experience a sense of guilt? David let out a breath. Either option works. He locked eyes with her. Yet, above all, I simply desire an opportunity to understand you better. Lena nodded, her silence stretching into a thoughtful pause. Then, with a hint of hesitation, she mentioned, I have a show next month. Some of my creations are set to be showcased. It's quite significant. David adjusted his posture with a subtle shift. That's truly remarkable. Where could it possibly be? Lower East Side. A quaint little gallery. Nothing extravagant. She paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. If you wish, you are welcome to join. David sensed a change stirring within him. A modest invitation, yet an invitation all the same. I would be delighted to. The following weeks flew by in a haze. David immersed himself in his tasks, yet his mind frequently wandered to Lena. He immersed himself in the study of art, seeking to grasp the essence of the world she inhabited. He even explored a few galleries, an experience he had never ventured into before, attempting to perceive the world through her eyes. He wished to offer his support, yet he was cautious not to intrude. She had expressed her need for time, and he was resolute in honoring that request. The evening of the performance came, and David felt a wave of anxiety greater than he had ever experienced for any business transaction. He felt a sense of uncertainty about what lay ahead. It remained uncertain whether Lena would recognize him or if she would come to regret her invitation entirely. Upon his arrival at the quaint gallery, he found it bustling with people. The walls were adorned with paintings, each one telling its own tale, offering a distinct viewpoint. In the heart of the room, he beheld her creation. The initial artwork was a whirlwind of abstraction, disordered yet captivatingly lovely. The second was more organized. A depiction of a woman, her visage partially hidden, as though she exists in the liminal space between two selves. And then it appeared. The portrait of Sarah. This version stood apart from what Lena had previously presented to him. It was more rare and fragile. Sarah's expression in the painting held a gentle quality, as if she were gazing at something, or someone, with a deep sense of understanding. David sensed a constriction in his throat. For years, he had endeavored to suppress the anguish of losing Sarah, persuading himself that sorrow was a burden he could overcome, something he could set aside. Yet, as he stood there gazing at that painting, he came to understand just how much of her essence remained vibrant in Lena. He glanced over to see Lena observing him intently from a short distance away. You created this not long ago, he remarked, his tone softer than he had meant it to be. She gave a slight nod. Absolutely. David gulped. It's astonishing. Lena shifted her weight, appearing somewhat uneasy. She confessed that she was uncertain about including it in the show. But then it crossed my mind, perhaps she would prefer to be present. David nodded, his heart weighed down by a surge of feelings. She definitely would. They lingered in quietude for a brief moment before Lena broke the stillness once more. I feared you might not show up. David gazed at her, astonished. What is the reason behind this? She gave a slight shrug. I'm uncertain. Individuals express their thoughts frequently. It doesn't imply they will actually carry it out. David locked eyes with her. I shall. Without fail. Lena hesitated before replying, yet there was a subtle shift in her expression that revealed a hint of warmth. Thank you for being here, she finally expressed. David beamed with delight. I wouldn't have traded it for anything. As the night unfolded, David observed Lena engaging with the other artists, noticing how she thrived in this environment. She was meant to be a part of this vibrant realm, filled with hues and creativity. For the first time, he sensed that he was beginning to find his place in her world. Before moving on to the next part, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. David was unaware of how long he had been holding his breath until the conclusion of Lena's art show. Seated in his car, parked outside the gallery on the Lower East Side, he found himself revisiting the moments of the evening in his thoughts. Her momentary pause before extending the invitation, the anxious tension in her stance upon his arrival, and the subtle yet inviting warmth in her voice as she expressed her gratitude for his presence all painted a vivid picture of her emotions. It may not have been significant, but it held its own value. For the first time since learning about his daughter, he sensed that he had truly moved closer to being a part of her life. He felt a sense of uncertainty about what lay ahead. What comes next? Or was this truly the pinnacle of his aspirations? Some brief exchanges and moments together. He desired more, yet he understood the wisdom in restraint. He had already lost too much time. The next morning, he found himself mindlessly scrolling through his phone, eager to uncover anything related to the art world. He delved into the world of modern creators, exploring gallery showcases and artistic trends, seeking to grasp the realm that Lena occupied. He had devoted his life to making choices rooted in logical calculations and assessing risks, yet this situation felt entirely different. This wasn't a transaction where he could foresee the result. He was exploring unknown realms, and for the first time in years, he found peace in that uncertainty. A couple of days later, Lena made a call. For the first time, she took the initiative to contact him rather than waiting for him to make the move. Hey, she said, her tone relaxed yet tinged with an elusive undercurrent that he couldn't fully identify. Are you free for lunch? David straightened in his chair at his desk, momentarily taken aback. Naturally, he responded, maybe a bit too hastily. Where might that be? A quaint diner nestled in Queens awaits discovery. It's quite simple. I will be present. Upon his arrival at the diner, Lena was already seated in a booth by the window. She appeared transformed, exuding a sense of ease while maintaining an air of caution. David settled into the chair opposite her, his gaze fixed on her features. He came to understand that despite the many discussions they had engaged in over the past few weeks, he still lacked a true understanding of her. Lena savored a sip of her iced coffee before she began to speak. Let me lay it out for you. I'm uncertain about the expected outcome of this. Us together. David nodded slowly, allowing her the room to elaborate. I lived my entire life without you, she remarked. And now, all at once, you find yourself here. I find myself uncertain whether that's a positive or negative thing. David took a deep breath, weighing his words with precision. The past is unchangeable, Lena. If it were within my power, I certainly would. However, I am unable to do so. My only focus is to exist in this moment. If you would permit me. She drummed her fingers on the glass, lost in thought. I prefer to take my time with things. I prefer to avoid obligatory family gatherings or awkward emotional exchanges. I'm at a loss, honestly. I prefer to approach this gradually. David gave a slight nod. That seems reasonable. Lena breathed out, a sense of relief washing over her as he refrained from pressing her further. I have no desire for wealth. Simply sharing that thought. David offered a faint smile. Understood. She gazed at him, her eyes searching deeply, as if weighing the possibility of trust. She confessed that she had numerous questions. "Feel free to inquire about anything you wish." Lena paused, contemplating her words before finally breaking the silence. "Did you have feelings for my mom?" David sensed the gravity of the question loom above him. For a long time, he had refrained from considering Sarah in that manner. "Indeed," he remarked, his voice now softer. "I certainly did." Lena nodded, her expression suggesting she had anticipated that response, yet still found solace in hearing it confirmed. "So, what kept you from being there?" David inhaled deeply. He was obligated to reveal the truth to her. "My mother and I shared a relationship filled with complexities. In our time together, we were filled with youth. I believed I had my entire future mapped out, and she simply didn't align with that vision. Not in the manner she truly warranted. At the time of her departure, I was unaware of her pregnancy. Had I possessed that, the outcome would have been altered." Lena's silence lingered, leaving David uncertain whether it signaled something positive or negative. Ultimately, she remarked that you weren't a frequent topic of her conversations. "Only fragments and snippets. I always thought you were just someone who didn't give a damn." "I cared," David stated with conviction. "I simply had no idea." Lena toyed with the straw in her drink. "I believe I desire to learn more. Concerning you. Concerning her. Concerning all matters." David sensed a soothing release in his chest. "Then I shall reveal all that you seek to understand." The remainder of the lunch was punctuated by inquiries, ranging from the light-hearted to the more profound. She inquired about his profession, his early years, his existence prior to their acquaintance. In exchange, he inquired about her, her creative pursuits, her upbringing, and her cherished moments with Sarah. It may not have been flawless, but it was a step forward. A beginning. As they exited the diner, Lena paused, contemplating her next words. "I'm not quite sure where this is headed, but I suppose I don't mind your company." David beamed with joy. It was the nearest semblance of acceptance she had offered him thus far. "It's wonderful to hear that." As she turned to leave, a realization dawned on him. This went beyond his efforts to embrace fatherhood. It was about grasping the life that had unfolded in his absence and discovering a way to integrate into it, not out of necessity but from a genuine desire. For the first time, he dared to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, Lena felt the same way. Before moving on to the next part, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. David had always been a man of unwavering confidence. Each choice he made throughout his career was intentional, measured, and exacting. As he made his way home from the diner that evening, a cloud of uncertainty enveloped his thoughts. Lena had offered him an opportunity, albeit a modest one, yet still significant. He revisited the dialogue in his thoughts, cherishing the moment she had finally gazed at him, not with bitterness but with intrigue. A change, understated yet significant. He realized at this moment that her curiosity ran deeper than she was willing to acknowledge. And that signified the presence of hope. The following weeks unfolded in a haze of careful exchanges. Lena wasn't one to reach out casually, yet occasionally she would drop him a message. Occasionally, there would be an inquiry regarding her mother, or perhaps a fleeting remark about something she had encountered in her reading or viewing. David replied to each message, mindful to tread lightly. He discovered from the outset that waiting was essential with her. One evening, as he settled into his study with his laptop aglow, an email from Lena appeared in his inbox. It came as a surprise, especially since they had just conversed the previous day. The subject line was straightforward, a beckoning invitation. His heart raced as he pressed it open. "This weekend, my friend is hosting an intimate gathering at her studio in Brooklyn. It's quite casual, just a handful of creators and a few folks from the neighborhood. If you wish to join, you're welcome to do so. Take your time. Lena." David gazed at the screen, absorbing the words once more. The message lacked emotional depth. It wasn't even notably warm. Yet, the mere act of her inviting him, unprompted and of her own accord, seemed to signify a significant turning point. He swiftly composed a message, maintaining a relaxed tone throughout. I would be delighted to. Please inform me of the time and location. Looking forward to seeing you there. On the evening of the event, David made his way to the studio, a transformed warehouse nestled in Williamsburg. The atmosphere was softly illuminated, adorned with an array of paintings and sculptures interspersed throughout the room. This was not the type of gathering he was accustomed to experiencing. Casual vibes, no pressure to impress, just individuals engaging in conversation, enjoying laughter, and exchanging their creative expressions. He sensed a disconnect, yet his resolve to persevere remained unwavering. He noticed Lena on the other side of the room engaged in conversation with a young woman sporting vibrant pink hair. She had yet to catch sight of him, and for a brief moment, he paused, contemplating whether he was encroaching upon something private. But then, as if attuned to his presence, Lena turned. Their eyes locked, and she offered him a subtle nod, a sign of recognition that bordered on warmth. He approached, his hands tucked into his pockets to avoid any restless movements. Hey, he remarked, maintaining a cheerful tone. Lena motioned toward the woman next to her. Hey David, it's Olivia. She manages this space. Olivia extended her hand, her grip strong and assured. Ah, so you're the father. David arched an eyebrow, casting a sidelong glance at Lena, who responded with an exaggerated eye roll. Lena whispered, she really speaks her mind. Olivia smiled brightly. It's a positive development. No one here seems to care. David let out a soft laugh. It seems I ought to get ready for what's ahead. The evening unfolded with effortless dialogue, yet David observed Lena maintaining her space. She made introductions to a handful of individuals, yet she maintained a respectful distance, showing no particular urgency to remain close to him. He realized that this was her domain, and he was just an invited visitor. The mere act of her inviting him carried significance. In a serene nook of the studio, he paused to admire one of Lena's paintings. The composition was a whirlwind of deep reds and blues, merging seamlessly in a dance of chaos and purpose. He sensed an essence within the piece, an unarticulated yet potent force. Lena's voice drifted in from behind him, speaking of her mother. David glanced over to find her there, arms folded defiantly. It's truly stunning, he remarked with sincerity. It feels unrefined. Lena gave a slight nod. A few years back, I created it while I was still navigating the complexities of what grief truly meant. David gulped, the knot in his throat tightening. She shrugged, as if to say it didn't matter. On certain days, and on others, not so much. She hesitated for a moment before her words flowed once more. She never truly had the chance to express herself as an artist in the way she envisioned. She was perpetually engaged in her tasks, relentlessly striving to balance her finances. I find myself pondering that frequently. David sensed the gravity of her words. He had devoted countless hours to reflecting on his own losses, the years of being unaware of Lena's existence, yet he had not fully considered the depth of what Sarah had endured. The challenges she undoubtedly encountered, the sacrifices she willingly embraced. She would take great pride in you, he murmured gently. Lena's expression changed, a hint of vulnerability flickering in her eyes before she turned her gaze elsewhere. Perhaps. David felt the urge to elaborate, yet he understood the importance of restraint. Instead, he simply remained there, gazing at the painting alongside her. For a moment, it seemed as though a genuine connection was blossoming between them, effortless, unhurried, simply authentic. As the evening drew to a close, Lena accompanied him to the door. You didn't embarrass me, she said, a slight smirk playing on her lips. I'll consider that a victory, David responded. She paused, contemplating her words before continuing. Thank you for being here. I appreciate the invitation. Lena gave a slight nod before pivoting back to the studio, silent and resolute. David observed her departure, a subtle wave of relief washing over him. The journey ahead remained extensive, yet this evening marked yet another progression. For the time being, that sufficed. Before moving on, please subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. David lingered outside Lena's apartment in Brooklyn, cradling a small, meticulously wrapped box in his hands. He had devoted the past few weeks to meticulously nurturing their connection, aware that it was a delicate structure that could easily crumble with a hasty move or an ill-chosen word. Yet, following the evening spent at the art studio, an undeniable shift had occurred. Lena began to open up to him, not entirely, but just enough for him to catch fleeting glimpses of the daughter he had never realized existed. This evening, he found himself here, driven by a desire to embrace the next step, one that had lingered in his thoughts for quite some time. With a steadying inhale, he rapped his knuckles against the door. The door creaked open, revealing Lena, her face a mask of inscrutability. "You didn't mention you were coming," she remarked, leaning against the doorframe. David beamed with delight. "I aimed for it to be a delightful surprise." He paused, the small box lingering in his hand before he finally offered it to her. "I have a little something for you." Lena regarded the box with a wary glance before accepting it and moving to the side to allow him entry. "It wasn't necessary for you to get me anything." "I know," David said, observing her as she settled onto the couch and delicately peeled away the wrapping from the box. Within lay a refined silver bracelet, understated yet sophisticated. A delicate engraving lay hidden within, a tribute to the daughter I never had the chance to know, yet will forever hold in my heart. Lena gazed at it intently, her fingers delicately gliding over the letters. David paused, a sense of anticipation gripping him as he awaited her response. Then, without glancing in his direction, she murmured, "It's beautiful." David let out a slow breath, sensing a burden ease from his chest. "I wish to give you something from my heart. Something genuine." Lena nodded, her gaze fixed on the bracelet. "I'm not sure how to approach this," she confessed. "I'm unsure of what it means to embody the role of a daughter." David settled into his seat opposite her, his tone soft and soothing. "I'm uncertain about how to fulfill the role of your father as well. However, we can work through it as a team." Lena finally lifted her gaze to him, and for the first time, there was an absence of anger, an absence of resentment. Only truthfulness. "Understood." It was an unassuming word, yet it bore immense significance. David sensed a constriction in his throat, yet he merely nodded in response. "Understood." In the months that followed, their bond deepened and flourished. They began to gather frequently, occasionally over coffee, at times for dinner, and sometimes simply to stroll through Central Park. Lena had her boundaries, and David honored them, never overstepping. Yet gradually, those barriers began to crumble. As dusk settled, they strolled through Times Square, the vibrant lights shimmering in the surrounding windows. Lena buried her hands in her pockets, casting a sidelong glance at him. "I did some research on you," she said. "Prior to our encounter." David let out a soft laugh. "So, what did you discover?" "So, you're wealthy," she remarked with a sly grin. "Like incredibly wealthy." David chuckled. "Condemned." Lena let out a deep breath. "It's peculiar. My mother never sought anything from you. She didn't even mention my existence to you. We faced numerous challenges. On certain nights, she would forego her own meals, prioritizing my nourishment above her own. And you," she halted her steps and turned to confront him. "All that you desired was within your grasp." David experienced a profound pain in his chest. "I understand. It pains me deeply that I couldn't be present. If I had been aware." Lena cut in, "I know. I wish she had shared that with you. Perhaps circumstances could have unfolded in another way." David nodded, forcing down the guilt that threatened to suffocate him. "Perhaps. Yet, what lies ahead is all we possess at this moment." Lena gazed at the bracelet adorning her wrist, the very piece she had donned each day since he presented it to her. Indeed. The horizon ahead. As the months transformed into a year, their connection deepened significantly. David began to share glimpses of his world with Lena. The tasks he once prioritized, the camaraderie with his peers, all those elements that had held great importance in his life now felt trivial when weighed against the bond he was nurturing with his daughter. And Lena, in her own way, guided him into the depths of her universe. She revealed her artwork to him, shared tales from her childhood, and gradually began to refer to him as Dad. The initial moment she uttered those words, David found it necessary to retreat to the bathroom to regain his composure. One day, Lena reached out to him with surprising news. "I want you to come with me somewhere," she said over the phone. "Absolutely. Where is it?" "To the resting place of my mother." David felt a tightness in his chest. He had always intended to go, yet the thought of going solo never appealed to him. Lena was now inviting him to accompany her. It would be a privilege, he murmured gently. Several days passed, and they found themselves before Sarah's grave in Greenwood Cemetery. The atmosphere was invigorating, and the foliage had started to transform into a tapestry of vibrant hues. Lena knelt and gently laid fresh flowers on the grave, her voice soft as she began to speak. "Mom, this is David," she said, her voice quivering just a bit. "I realize you chose not to mention me to him, and I'm left wondering why that is. Yet, he is present at this moment." She inhaled deeply and cast a fleeting look in his direction. "I believe you would find him quite appealing." David's eyes stung with emotion as he rested his hand on the cold headstone. "My deepest apologies, Sarah," he murmured. "For the absence. For lacking awareness. I assure you, I will be the father our daughter truly deserves." Lena extended her hand, catching him off guard. "I believe she would be fine with that." David grasped her hand tightly, a wave of gratitude washing over him. Time had stolen countless years from their grasp, yet now they found themselves with a renewed opportunity. For the first time in ages, he genuinely felt that everything was going to be all right. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to our channel, liking, and sharing it with your friends.